In the 20th century, there was a scientist named Justin Schmidt. He conducted experiments on himself. Now, scientists testing things on themselves might not sound unusual. That's nothing new. But Justin Schmidt tested pain. He set out to create a scale of pain intensity. It's terrifying to imagine, but this brave man allowed insects to sting him in the arm, the neck, even the lip, in order to determine which pain was the most severe. He found the answer to his question. He described the bullet ant sting as pure, intense, brilliant pain, like walking over hot coals with a 3-inch nail in your heel. But all of that is pain that one can survive. But what about the kind no one ever lived to describe? The kind that left behind only bones. Archaeologists later uncover shocking things. Each discovery is a cast of suffering, buried in the earth for hundreds or even thousands of years, as if death itself had decided to leave a signature behind. Today, you'll find out. What made the screaming mummy scream? What if your entire body were one giant wound and someone poured a sack of salt over it? Which is better, to be eaten by a crocodile or a bear? And how did those horrific incidents happen? The most brutal human deaths preserved in archaeological finds. Some of the most chilling human remains were discovered in the village of Fen Stanton in Cambridgeshire, Britain. Why are archaeologists digging there? The answer is simple. The site lies along the Via Devana Roman road. It connected Cambridge and Godmanchester, pronounced locally as Gumster. A Roman settlement once thrived along this route. Life was bustling there: houses, trade, workshops, and nearby a cemetery. At first glance, it appeared to be a typical burial ground. But beneath one of the mounds, archaeologists found something far darker than just bones. They found a crucifixion, or rather proof that someone had been executed this way. So what was the story behind this? It happened nearly 1900 years ago, sometime between 130 and 360 AD. The executed person was a man aged approximately 25 to 35. At first glance, everything seemed peaceful. He was lying on his back, hands crossed over his abdomen. The man had been carefully buried, but there were 12 iron nails nearby. Later analysis revealed traces of wood on them. Some believe they were either remnants of a cross or parts of a stretcher used to keep the body from directly touching the ground. It's known that none of these 12 nails were driven into bones or connected to the execution itself, but there was also a 13th nail. It ended up in the area of the right heel, piercing through the bone. This wasn't done after death. All the evidence suggests it was part of the execution itself. In fact, crucifixion was one of the most agonizing forms of punishment in ancient Rome. It was typically reserved for slaves, fugitives, or rebels. But it was the nailed heel that made this case unique. Victims were usually tied to the cross. Even when nails were used, they were often removed afterward. But here, the nail remained. But who do you think this man was? Judging by the bones, he was probably a slave. His thin shin bones suggest he had been shackled for a long time. His teeth were decayed, he had arthritis, signs of infections, and effects of malnutrition. He was ill. He suffered. His life was filled with pain, and his death was the pinnacle of that suffering. And yet he was buried. And that's what's strange. Normally, crucified people weren't buried. Their bodies were typically left to rot at the execution site as a warning to others. But this man was buried near the other residents of the settlement. That suggests someone showed him compassion, or perhaps wanted to conceal the fact of his crucifixion. Maybe this was a local execution carried out without imperial authorization. Or perhaps it was a personal act of vengeance, a punishment for escape. Scholars argue about this, but everyone agrees the find is unique. This is only the fourth archaeologically confirmed case of crucifixion in the world. The first was found in Jerusalem in 1968. The second and third were in Egypt and Italy. But it was the British discovery that provided the clearest, most physical, and undeniable evidence: a nail in the heel. It's almost like a document, only written not in ink, but in pain. But it wasn't only slaves who suffered in ancient times. Gruesome deaths also came for those who wore gold and walked the marble floors of palaces. In 1881, near modern-day Luxor, archaeologists began excavating the mortuary temple and tomb complex in Deir al-Bahri. It was built about 4,000 years ago during the reign of Pharaoh Mentuhotep II. A stone throw from it, scientists discovered a secret burial ground later named DB320. This site was used by priests as a hiding place for mummies. They relocated sarcophagi containing the remains of pharaohs, priestesses, and nobles here to protect them from tomb robbers during a time of turmoil in ancient Egypt. One particular mummy immediately caught the researchers' attention. First, because of its appearance. The body had its head thrown back, the facial muscles distorted, and the mouth wide open, frozen in an expression so horrifying that it chills the blood. Even more curious, the mummy was unmarked, which was highly unusual. It was also wrapped in sheepskin, a material considered disgraceful for burial. And yet, the body was found among members of the royal family. What's more, internal organs were typically removed in ancient Egyptian mummification. They were then separately embalmed and stored in special jars, called canopic jars. But this body was intact. That's curious, to say the least. What would have been so horrifying to leave such an agonizing expression for thousands of years on his face? The answer came unexpectedly when scientists discovered the mummy's identity. He was none other than the son of Pharaoh Ramses III, Prince Pentuer. This was confirmed through DNA testing. But if this was a young prince, why the sheepskin? Why the anonymity? Later research revealed that he had been involved in a conspiracy to kill Ramses III. The plot eventually failed. According to ancient court papyri, the prince was sentenced to death by poison. What kind of dreadful poison did Pentuer take? So terrible that even the embalmers couldn't close his mouth afterward? Scientists still don't know for sure, but there are reasons to believe that his death was slow and filled with unimaginable torment. It may have been a form of punishment, and he wasn't buried as a prince, but as a criminal, without the usual rituals, without organ removal, and without an inscription bearing his name. If that last death seemed horrifying to you, what will you say about the next one? In the 1930s, on a high bank of the Euphrates River in eastern Syria, archaeologists were excavating the ruins of the ancient fortress of Dura Europos. They were digging right alongside the wall of the old fort when suddenly they discovered a tunnel. It was narrow, collapsed, and had some bodies inside. 19 dead Roman soldiers, and a little farther in, one Persian warrior, fully armed, no signs of battle, no wounds. It's as if they had just fallen asleep. At first, scholars thought it might have been a collapse, or that they had been sealed in, but then they began to examine the soil itself. The samples showed an abnormally high content of sulfur and remnants of flammable resins. The area smelled like an old chemical storage site. Even after centuries, the earth held traces of something toxic. But what happened? This took place nearly 1,800 years ago. At the time, Dura Europos was more than just a settlement. It was a real fortress. It stood at the crossroads of two great countries, Rome and Persia. When the siege began, the Persians knew that breaking through the walls head-on would be difficult, so they went underground. Persian troops started digging a tunnel beneath the city walls. The Romans caught on and began digging a counter-tunnel to intercept the assault, heading underground to meet the enemy. But the Persians turned out to be more cunning. As soon as they heard the sound of Roman pickaxes approaching, they prepared a trap. When the Romans broke into the Persian tunnel, the Persians ignited a toxic mixture: bitumen, sulfur crystals, and even charcoal. The result was a hellish smoke, thick with sulfurous gas. It was heavier than air. The poison slithered like a snake down the tunnel, filling every inch and cranny. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it. Your throat would burn, your eyes would go blind, and you would lose a sense of direction. The Romans were short of oxygen. One of them, judging by the position of his body, was trying to get out. He was simply moving forward, hoping for light. But there was no light. The last minutes of the Roman soldiers were spent in disorientation and panic. All 19 soldiers died. And what about the Persian? His body was found near the jars where the mixture had been set alight. He died from his own chemical attack, unable to escape in time. The siege of Dura Europos ultimately ended in the fall of the city. The Persians broke through, the walls were destroyed, and the garrison was wiped out. Rome lost the city forever. While death by asphyxiation is one of the most agonizing ways to die, the next story is bound to leave no one indifferent. This happened in Tanzania, a country where one literally uncovers the history of humanity simply by digging. The Olduvai Gorge. Here, in 2007, archaeologists discovered the remains of an ancient human, most likely Homo habilis. Their estimated age is about 1.75 million years. At first glance, this seemed like a typical find for the region, but it soon became clear upon closer inspection these were no ordinary fragments. The bones bore strange, terrifying bite marks, deep gouges, broken ribs, and most horrifying of all, missing limbs. Such damage would not have been caused by human conflict, falls, or even skirmishes with small animals. Such a powerful attack could only come from a giant predator, and it was Crocodilus anthropophagus. And yes, this literally means man-eating crocodile in Latin. It was nearly as long as a school bus, 24 feet, 7.5 meters long, and weighed up to a ton. Its teeth were the size of human fingers. And no, this isn't a myth. The crocodile's remains were also found nearby. Even more compelling, the bite marks on the human bones precisely matched the jaws of this crocodile. And suddenly, things became clear. Most likely, the person approached the water, perhaps to drink or to cross a river. The crocodile was waiting in ambush, and when the victim came close enough, it struck. A lightning-fast lunge. The crocodile began to spin, a move known as the death roll. It's a technique predators use to finish off their prey, and it worked. This person died from injuries. But one mystery still puzzles scientists. The remains of the very same crocodile were found near the human bones. How could that be? Did the person fight back and inflict a fatal wound on the predator? Or was it a confrontation between a group of people and the crocodile, with one tribe member dying, but the others managing to kill the beast? That's possible too. But more often than not, such cases have a mundane explanation. Geology mixed up the remains. This is a common occurrence when the bones of different creatures end up in the same sedimentary layer. In other words, the person died from a crocodile attack, and the remains of a different reptile just happened to lie not far from that spot. Over thousands of years, everything merged together. It's impossible to say for certain, but one thing is clear. Both the victim and the predator, or at least one of its kind, have lain side by side for nearly 2 million years. Yes, predatory animals have always been a threat to ancient humans, and the next archaeological discovery became a grim reminder of that. Where? Italy. More specifically, Liguria. The Arene Candide is a cave located 295 feet, 90 meters, above sea level. White sand, rocky cliffs, and an ancient quarry. Until the 1920s, a large dune covered the entrance, hence the name, the Cave of the White Sands. It's a dry, light-filled, and sheltered place, which is exactly why everything there was preserved in perfect condition. In the 1940s, archaeologists started excavations. They found 19 ancient burial sites, but one stood out. It was the skeleton of a teenager, around 14 to 15 years old. He lived 23,000 years ago. Later, he would be nicknamed the Young Prince, though in reality, he probably wasn't a prince. Still, he was buried with honor. The body lay neatly on its back. The face was turned southward. Underneath him, there was red ochre. This wasn't by chance. Ochre was a sacred element in burial rites at the time. It signified a connection to the spiritual. There were ornaments, ritual items, and a flint blade nearby. That blade was especially remarkable, extremely valuable, and brought from afar. It was like the latest iPhone of its era. Everything indicated this guy mattered. He was respected and loved. His death struck his close ones, maybe even the entire community. A closer look at the remains revealed chilling circumstances of his demise. A boy left the village. Maybe he went out to fetch water, or perhaps he just decided to walk along the slope, and then branches crack. He turns around. Too late. An animal bursts out from behind the rocks. Sudden attack. Nothing could help the boy already. The jaw was missing. So was the left shoulder. These parts were gone at the time of burial. not eaten by scavengers, not removed years later. They were destroyed at the moment of death. After careful study, scientists concluded it was a predator attack, most likely a bear. Scientists performed an isotope analysis on his teeth, and here's what they found. Seafood constituted about 25% of his diet. The guy wasn't poor. He lived near water, fished, ate shellfish. His community had structure, a well-established culture. And then, amidst all this, one day he was killed by a predator. What's also crucial is that he wasn't abandoned. His body was buried according to every rite. That means he was important. It was a tragedy for the whole group. Today, his remains are taken from exhibit to exhibit. His bones have been shown in Genoa, Rome, and Finale Ligure. Scientists create 3D reconstructions. They form theories, but still, we don't know who he truly was. While some tribes tearfully mourned the loss of their people, others sacrificed them, cold-bloodedly, with no mercy, in the name of gods they feared more than death itself. 1950, Denmark. Workers are harvesting peat when they suddenly uncover a corpse. At first glance, it seems this person has died very recently. A leather cord is tied around the neck. The face appears calm, as if peacefully asleep. In panic, the workers call the police, suspecting a recent murder. Rumors spread through the town. The body is sent for forensic analysis. Radiocarbon dating reveals the person died in the 3rd century BC. Yep, 2,000 years ago. This was the man from Tollund, the most famous Bog Mummy. And this wasn't the first discovery of its kind. Each time it happens, the reaction is the same. Shock, police, investigation, and then, oh, sorry, it turns out he's just 2,000 years old. For centuries, the bodies of the dead have been found in the peat bogs of northern Europe, from Ireland to Poland. Why? Because for ancient peoples, the bog was a boundary between worlds, a place where spirits and gods could hear more clearly. They didn't kill random people. Most often, these were sacrifices or punishments. And then the bodies were discarded into the bog. Thanks to sphagnum moss, the acidic environment, and lack of oxygen, the flesh was preserved, and with it, the imprints of fear and pain. Some of these mummies were truly disturbing. 1922, Germany, Lower Saxony, a small sphagnum bog near the village of Kehausen. Here, the body of a child was found. The boy was between 7 and 10 years old. Later analysis would show he died between 400 and 300 BC. He wasn't found during an archaeological expedition. It was just a regular peat extraction. But the discovery immediately caught scientists' attention because it was different from others. The boy's body was found alone. No other remains nearby. He wore a fur cloak. His hands and feet were tied with cloth from his own clothing. There were 3 slashed wounds on his neck. The boy's left arm had 1 self-defense wound. He had tried to protect himself. Perhaps he knew he was going to die. Maybe he saw the faces of the killers and tried to run away, but he couldn't. His femur shows evidence of a limp. He may have been sick and vulnerable. Perhaps someone was accompanying him to certain death, his own murder. Resistance was useless. They throw his body into the mire. In a moment, he vanishes into the darkness. Only thousands of years later, we learn about this incident. Why was he killed? That remains a mystery. One theory is ritual sacrifice. Perhaps the boy was chosen deliberately because he was weak and helpless. Perhaps people believed his death would appease the gods. But there's another theory. Punishment, execution, revenge? We don't know. The only thing we know is that his death was not an accident. If the previous stories of gruesome deaths made you shiver, the next one is no less shocking. What do you think a salt mine might hide? Probably nothing more than dust and, well, salt. But in Iran, one such mine became a real time capsule, preserving not just traces of the past, but actual people entombed in salt as if in glass. In 1993, workers at the Sherabad mine in southern Iran were extracting salt. Suddenly, the pickaxe of one of the miners struck something hard. But it wasn't rock. It was a human body, a salt-preserved mummy. But not the Egyptian kind. There were no resins, bandages, or sarcophagi. What they found was a person seemingly pulled straight out of the past, with hair, a beard, and earrings still intact, all in disturbingly good condition. How is that even possible? The answer lies in the mine itself. These sites have been used for centuries to extract salt, thanks to the enormous underground salt domes formed millions of years ago. And as we know, salt is a perfect preservative. It draws out moisture, halts decomposition, and literally preserves the body like a time capsule. Scientists named him Saltman No. 1 and dated his death to the 4th century AD. And here's the interesting part. He wasn't alone. Over the years, 6 similar bodies have been discovered in the mine, all of them dying at different times. But the first one, found in 1993, remains the most famous. He had long hair and a beard, earrings in his ears, and leather shoes. He had a knife and some pieces of fabric, and there was a small pouch of salt nearby. Perhaps he was a miner, or a traveler who accidentally found himself trapped. But how exactly did he die? Let's imagine a heavy gloom deep inside a mine. In a narrow corridor, a man with a pickaxe moves forward step by careful step. He's alone. All around, walls made of salt. Suddenly, he hears a crack. Something crumbles above. Salt. He looks up. A second later, everything collapses. His body is buried under the salt. Silence. Darkness. His body was found with numerous fractures. Most likely, the man died almost immediately with no chance to escape, and possibly no time to even grasp what was happening. But it's also possible he heard the cave-in begin and fully realized the horror of the situation. And this is still not even the worst part. We've all heard the saying to rub salt in the wound, meaning to make a difficult situation even worse. And it's true. Even a small cut stings terribly when exposed to salt. What the victim must have felt in those final moments is too awful to imagine.